Hello, everyone. Good evening to viewers in India and good morning to those joining us from across Canada. Bonjour et bonsoir à toutes et à tous. My name is Christine Nakamura, Vice President of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada in Toronto. On behalf of the Foundation and our mission partner, the Canada-India Business Council, it's my extreme pleasure to be your host and MC for the next couple of days. Before we begin, I'd like to express our Foundation's solidarity with Ukraine and its people who have, since the beginning of this unprovoked attack, been inspiring the world with their bravery in their fight to retain their freedom and independence. As our mission is about women, I would be remiss not to mention that 36,000 Ukrainian women have proudly and courageously enlisted to fight for democracy and Ukraine's sovereignty. Canada is home to almost 1.4 million Ukrainians, the third largest population outside of Ukraine and Russia. Therefore, the pain and suffering of the Ukrainian people are deeply felt by most Canadians here in Canada. This senseless war has affected many nations around the world. Reportedly, 20,000 Indian students have been evacuated from Ukraine, but thousands still remain stranded. Sadly, one Indian medical student with a promising career has lost his life. Our deepest condolences to those who have lost loved ones, and we hope that the people of Ukraine and everyone personally affected by this tragedy will soon find peace and security. Bienvenue and welcome to day one of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada's first Canadian women-only virtual business mission to India, the fifth in our series of women's missions to Asia. I'd like to first acknowledge that while we are all meeting in a global digital space, the places Canadians call home are the traditional territories of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. This mission is being hosted from Toronto on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Concerning housekeeping matters, please click the cloud button with the arrow to the right of your screen to download your e-brochure, which includes the agenda, speaker biographies, and the directory of delegates and company profiles. The same button provides access to the French language translation. Please post your questions and comments in the chat box above the cloud button, and feel free to use the emoticons. This session is being recorded and will be posted to our website after the mission. And the session today will conclude at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 10 p.m. India Standard Time. Allow me to begin by congratulating our Canadian delegates who hail from regions across Canada. Delegates have been carefully selected from Canada's best and brightest in STEM-related sectors for their amazing technological innovations in education, healthcare, and sustainable solutions. Delegates should be very proud of being part of this exceptional cohort of women entrepreneurs. I'll take a few minutes now to explain why our foundation launched efforts to help Canadian women entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Since 2015, the Canadian government has been pursuing dual efforts to, one, promote international trade diversification by SMEs, and two, advance women's economic empowerment. Why? SMEs are the backbone of the Canadian economy, accounting for 99.7% of all businesses in Canada. But pre-pandemic, only 15.6% of our SMEs were women-owned, which means that by increasing the number of women-owned businesses and facilitating their growth through international market diversification, there's a huge potential to grow our economy. But COVID-19 has regrettably affected the economic advancement of women worldwide, and especially those who own and lead businesses. As part of our economic recovery efforts, those of us who support women-owned businesses need to collaborate and work even harder to enable women entrepreneurs to thrive. Our team is contributing to government efforts by helping women-owned businesses to scale through access to dynamic markets in Asia. Our mission series was created after hosting 8 roundtables across Canada with over 300 women in business to determine obstacles preventing women SMEs to diversify into high potential markets in Asia. Canadian entrepreneurs tend to be risk averse, but women entrepreneurs have a greater aversion. Participants advised that unfamiliar markets were too risky to attempt on their own, but if organizers with experience and know-how in Asian markets were willing to facilitate introductions through trade missions dedicated to women-owned businesses, they would consider expansion into Asia. Not having to compete against male counterparts on a trade mission in traditionally male-dominated markets of Asia would offer greater potential for them to find business partners. So since April 2019, we have led 4 women-only trade missions to Asia, 1 in person to Japan pre-pandemic, and since 2020, 3 virtual and hybrid missions to South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand, and India is our 5th mission. Including delegates for this India mission, we have now directly supported just under 100 women entrepreneurs with introductions to prospective business partners and by providing pre-mission training on market intelligence, export and import regulations, geopolitics, culture, and business protocol to amplify prospects for their success on our missions. And thousands of viewers from around the world have attended our virtual missions to learn about Canada's efforts and supports to help women in business scale up and succeed in the global marketplace. We are monitoring outcomes from our missions, and I'm pleased to say that desirable results are mounting, with negotiations still ongoing as relationship building, especially with Asian partners, takes time to develop. As India is projected to remain the fastest growing major economy in the world from 2021 to 2024, we are hopeful that this mission will add to the successes already achieved. Our missions have led to the creation of a powerful and international ecosystem of women leaders and entrepreneurs in Canada and in Asia, which continues to grow with every mission we lead. CanWin, or our Canadian Women's International Network, was launched in May 2021 to connect the women engaged through our dialogue series and missions to Asia. Women business and thought leaders, SMEs, and gender equality organizations are uniting together through this network to advance gender economic equality and empower Canadian women in business through engagement with friends in Asia. I invite all business women online today to join CanWin if you haven't already. The network's registration page will be posted in the chat box, but you can find it at www.asiapacific.ca/networks/CanWin. Our 2-day program aims to deepen Canada-India economic ties by enabling engagement between our Canadian delegates and business representatives of India's dynamic market. We have a lineup of inspiring Canadian and Indian speakers who will engage in frank dialogue on gender equality and women's economic advancement to help move the dial forward for our 2 economies. It now gives me extreme pleasure to call upon the chair of our first Canadian women-only virtual business mission to India and chair of the Canada-India Business Council, Ms. Patricia Koval, for welcoming remarks. For speaker bios, please refer to the event program. Pat, now over to you.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Christine. And let me say first, good evening to our friends in India and good morning to our mission delegates and guests here across Canada. And welcome, of course, to all of our friends and colleagues around the world. Let me say at the outset, on behalf of myself and the Canada-India Business Council, that I heartily endorse the remarks that you made regarding Ukraine. And we express our support for the beleaguered people of Ukraine and for all of the foreign students and other foreigners who are likewise trapped in that situation. Bonjour and bienvenue à tous et toutes. As chair of the board of the Canada-India Business Council, it gives me tremendous pleasure to collaborate with the Asia Pacific Foundation on this really exciting initiative designed to help women entrepreneurs and business leaders connect with potential partners in India and to showcase their in-demand services and technologies. The Canada-India Business Council and the Asia Pacific Foundation have a history of supporting one another on projects that bring together Canadian and Indian business people and extend bilateral business connections. And I congratulate all of those who have worked so hard to bring this mission to fruition, including Christine and the team at the Asia Pacific Foundation, and Victor Thomas and colleagues at the Canada-India Business Council. For those who do not know us, the Canada-India Business Council has existed since 1982. Our purpose is to promote trade between Canada and India, and in particular to serve the needs of businesses who are working on this thriving Canada-India business trade corridor. Our council nurtures business relationships and facilitates successful business connections and introductions by providing high quality, high touch environments for key stakeholders to convene and to engage engage in robust dialogue. And what a terrific opportunity that this virtual mission provides to catalyze meaningful economic, business, and policy engagement and interaction between Canada and India by creating bridges between women business leaders and entrepreneurs. Following the tragic and economic toll that COVID has taken on both of our countries, we're hopefully transitioning to a future where we may soon convene this and similar meetings in person. But for today, we are virtual. And today's program promises to be both comprehensive and engaging, focused on promoting women's economic empowerment in both Canada and India. Thank you to all of you who have agreed to share your perspectives and experience, and to all who are contributing as participants and observers in this dialogue for your active engagement. And finally, I'd like to extend my best wishes to the talented women business leaders and entrepreneurs who comprise this mission's business delegation. I wish you well as you build relationships and partnerships with colleagues in India. And I trust your technologies, services, and innovations will bring value to the world's fastest growing economy. So thank you, everyone. Merci tout le monde.
Good morning. I am excited to be here. I'm Sarah Wilshaw. I am the Chief Trade Commissioner for Canada and the Assistant Deputy Minister for International Business Development, Investment and Innovation at Global Affairs Canada. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Namaste to all our Indian friends. Before I go any further, I want to just acknowledge that I'm participating virtually from Ottawa on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Super pleased to connect with all of you from the various traditional territories and communities in which you are located today. And Christine and Patricia, on behalf of everyone participating today, thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, the Canada-India Business Council for organizing this women-only virtual business mission to India. I have worked with both of your organizations for many, many years. You run wonderful programs. It's exciting to be together. Le Service des délégués commerciaux, ou SDC, reconnaît l'importance croissante de l'approfondissement des liens commerciaux du Canada et la prospérité économique à long terme dans les économies à croissance rapide de la région Indo-Pacifique. Et l'Inde joue un rôle essentiel dans ces efforts. The TCS also recognizes that women entrepreneurs have a very important role to play in strengthening Canada and India's vibrant trade and investment relationship. But we know it's not always easy for businesses to scale up and grow into new international markets, especially if those businesses are owned by women, Indigenous persons, visible minorities, youth, LGBTQ2+ entrepreneurs, and others. These traditionally underrepresented groups face a number of specific challenges: difficulty in securing financing, lack of access to networks and mentors, and the need for capacity building, including through knowledge sharing. And that is why the TCS is building on more than 125 years of experience and 20+ years of dedicated work with women entrepreneurs to continue supporting them with targeted programs and services that help their companies to go global. Par exemple, dans le cadre de la stratégie pour entrepreneurs du gouvernement du Canada, la SDC a reçu 10 millions de dollars sur 5 ans pour étendre ses services aux femmes exportatrices par le biais de l'initiative Femmes d'affaires en commerce international. Additionally, we have a network of diversity champions in our regional offices, which are located all across Canada and are specifically equipped to help you reach new markets and succeed internationally. These champions are experienced trade officers who provide dedicated service to women exporters and exporters from other underrepresented groups. For Canada, supporting our women-owned businesses to grow into the dynamic Indian market means encouraging them to use every resource at their disposal. And the Trade Commissioner Service is a great place to start. Some of you know the TCS well and have made excellent use of our services. Others, however, may not be as familiar with what we do and how we can support your business, so please reach out. We have a network of 50 trade commissioners dedicated to helping you in India alone. You'll find them in New Delhi, in Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chandigarh, Ahmedabad, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Kolkata, and they bring expert market knowledge, local contacts, and on-the-ground support to Canadian businesses to help find and capitalize on international opportunities. I should know, I spent 3 incredible years leading that amazing team, and it is a really exciting to see where this mission is going and how this is all developed. Our goal is twofold: help Canadian businesses expand into new markets and ensure they get results when they're there, and we're doing that. On average, our clients export 20% more in value and to 25% more markets than other exporters. J'espère que de tels chiffres vous incitent à contacter les bureaux régionaux de SDC au Canada ainsi que nos délégués commerciaux en Inde afin d'en savoir plus sur la façon dont nous pouvons vous aider, vous et vos entreprises, à vous lancer sur le marché mondial. So, with that in mind, I'm going to turn things over to a woman who needs no introduction, but who has done so much to support and encourage women entrepreneurs from all backgrounds to start up, to scale up, and to grow their businesses into exciting new international markets. Mary Ng, Canada's Minister for International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business, and Economic Development. Minister, the floor is yours.
Sarah, thank you so much for that. I hope everyone can hear me. Terrific. Let me begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Wendat peoples. For those of us who are settlers or even immigrants to Canada, it's important to recognize that Indigenous peoples have always been here and that all Canadians have a role to play in reconciliation. I also want to acknowledge the circumstances in which we meet. Canada unequivocally condemns the Russian invasion of Ukraine and condemns Russia's egregious actions. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a direct challenge to the rules-based international order, and it cannot be allowed to succeed. Canada's Ukrainian community numbers more than 1.3 million people. Our two nations' histories are deeply intertwined. The current events in Eastern Europe are profoundly felt in homes and communities across Canada. And alongside our allies, Canada will stand resolutely against authoritarianism and will stand with a democratic Ukraine now and in the future. To everyone who is joining here today in Canada, welcome, bonjour à toutes et à tous, and namaste to all of our wonderful friends in India. It's really terrific to have already heard from both Christine and from Patricia. And I want to thank both the Asia Pacific Foundation as well as the Canada-India Business Council for all of their tremendous work at bringing us all together and getting on this virtual trade mission. And there's a lot of thanks that go around, to Sarah and the team that is here in Canada, but certainly on the ground. And you just heard from Sarah the tremendous wealth of expertise and Team Canada that's on the ground in India to help our businesses be successful. But I do want to thank partner organizations like the APF and the Canada Business Council. It is in partnership and in collaboration that we're all working together to help our Canadian businesses let alone a terrific women-led business mission to India. And here, there's lots of thanks to go around. I mean, of course, to Victor Thomas, but also at the APF, where Janice Fukuza is also there as the vice chair, and Jeff Nankoville, and of course the chair, and Pierre Pettigrew, who of course knows what it's like to sit in my seat. So really terrific, excellent leadership as we are launching this first ever women-led virtual business mission to India. C'est agréable de voir tout le monde en vertu. And welcome to the diverse and talented Canadian women entrepreneurs from across the country. I really want to thank Barate and for Elise for also joining. And here, as I was looking through the program, I mean, we have what I would sort of say a star team Canada of women leaders who are also on this mission. People that include Allison, who you'll listen to a little later, Ilsa, who is an incredible trailblazer, Gita, Uprasape, so just an incredible group of women leaders, Canadian women leaders. So that's terrific. And I apologize if I've missed anyone. This is a really great coming together of leaders here in Canada, but as well as in India, to do one thing, to help our businesses succeed and to get into that market, and to do this on both sides. But this mission really comes at a terrific time for two reasons. First, we're on the eve of International Women's Day, and this is the 5th women-led trade mission organized by the Asia Pacific Foundation after successful virtual trade missions to South Korea, to Australia and New Zealand, and to Taiwan. They've adapted. We've all adapted to delivering these trade missions virtually. Their first one, the first one was right before the pandemic, in person to Japan. And I think, as Patricia was saying, I hope that what we're all doing across the world is to fight COVID-19 in such a way that we will all be able to do these in person, but also taking advantage of what we have developed and some of the innovations that we've developed using this virtual format as well. These missions are supported by the federal government's $6 billion women's entrepreneurship strategy. It's unlocking access to financing, to supportive ecosystems, to resources, and certainly to opportunities like this trade mission to help women entrepreneurs succeed. This is important because we know that women have faced systemic barriers to success even long before COVID-19. I think someone said this earlier, and it bears repeating. Only 16% of Canadian small businesses are women-owned, and only 11% of those export. So there is one way to go, and that is up. And it is my commitment to keep working hard to grow this number, month after month, year after year. Supporting women entrepreneurs isn't just the right thing to do. It is indeed the smart thing to do. The return on this investment, the $6 billion women's entrepreneurship strategy is $6 billion, but we know we can add up to $150 billion to Canada's economy by ensuring the full and equal participation of women. And if the world follows suit, that's $12 trillion to the global economy. So I think it's very worthwhile doing. This is why the women's entrepreneurship strategy and the work that the Asia Pacific Foundation is doing with these women-led missions are just so incredibly important. It brings me to the second reason why this mission is so timely. I'm very excited to share with all of you for the first time that later this week, I will be traveling to India to strengthen our trade relationship and to open new doors for Canadian businesses and exporters. While there, I will meet with my counterpart in Minister Piyush Goyal, who you will hear from shortly, who's the Minister of Commerce, and I will hold a ministerial trade dialogue and investment to further deepen those trade ties. But here I also want to give a shout out to His Excellency Ajay Basraya, who is India's High Commissioner of Canada, for the terrific work he does in always bridging the relationship between the two countries. There's a lot of work ahead, and it builds on what we already have as a very, very strong foundation. Canada is the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. our agreements today in important economic zones across the world give Canada's businesses access to about 100 to 1.5 billion customers all around the world. It's over 60% of the world's economy. And I'm looking forward to keep growing these opportunities for Canadian entrepreneurs and businesses, including in India, which is poised to become the world's fastest growing major economy. My mandate from the Prime Minister is to further diversify our trade, increase opportunities for Canadian entrepreneurs to succeed, both here at home and in international markets, including across the Indo-Pacific. And I can't certainly do this work alone. At the end of the day, trade agreements are just that. It's entrepreneurs like you that's going to bring them to life. And it's why our government offers what I call Canada's Trade Toolkit, which you heard a bit from Sarah as well. It's made up of really important support and resources to help Canadian businesses be successful. The Business Development Bank of Canada, Export Development Canada, Invest in Canada, and of course, the terrific Trade Commissioner Service with its on-the-ground presence in India, but literally on the ground in over 160 places, countries around the world to help our Canadian companies and entrepreneurs and businesses be successful. Je vous encourage toutes et tous à aller consulter ces utiles. These services are already helping Canadian small businesses expand in India. And I'm going to just draw one example. And I know that there are many, many more. But if you look at this one, Growing Greener Innovations, it's based in Edmonton. It's a women-owned and award-winning clean tech company. And with the support of the Trade Commissioner Service, Growing Greener Innovations signed on an agreement with an Indian partner to supply, to install, and to maintain solar and battery systems in more than 1,400 villages in northeastern India. This is, of course, pending approval, but I'm very excited about that example and many, many more, including all of the women entrepreneurs that are on this mission today. I'm committed to ensuring that even more businesses can succeed in India and indeed around the world. And I hope that you'll leave this trade mission with new opportunities, key networks, valuable experiences, but also with the knowledge that your federal government is committed to helping you build on the incredible success that you are already achieving as business leaders and women entrepreneurs. So thank you so much. Merci, namaste, and enjoy the next 2 days.
Minister, thank you for those encouraging words and for continuing to inspire women around the world, and especially our Canadian women entrepreneurs, to grow their businesses through international trade diversification. Your relentless support is appreciated by SMEs from coast to coast to coast. So thank you so very, very much. And now, we have, due to technical issues, and what's a virtual trade mission without tech problems? We have a technical issue in screening Minister Goyal's video message today, but we are very fortunate that India's Consul General to Toronto, Ms. Apurva Srivastava, has kindly offered to read Minister Goyal's message for us today live on screen. So with no further ado, I'm going to call upon Consul General Srivastava to read the Minister's message. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for this honor of reading the message of Honorable Commerce of Industry Minister of India, Mr. Piyush Goyal. So I'll start reading the message. Her Excellency Mary Eng, Canada's Minister of International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development, Canadian women delegates, Asia Pacific Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to welcome the first Canadian women-only virtual business mission to India. I appreciate the efforts of Honorable Minister in the field of women development. She has been a strong advocate of women's trade missions to not just India, but also other nations like South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand. India-Canada bilateral relations have made a significant progress under her leadership. We hope to welcome Minister Mary Eng soon during her visit to India for the 5th Ministerial Dialogue. I look forward to review the entire gamut of trade and investment and resume negotiations on India-Canada Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. I congratulate the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada and its Vice President, Ms. Christine Nakamura, for leading this virtual women-only business mission. Canadian women delegates present today represent Canada's diversity and Nari Shakti, that is women power. Canada has been a home away from home for Indians. It hosts one of the largest Indian diasporas in the world. 1/3 of Canada's foreign students are Indians. Several Indian origin women, CEOs, doctors, and professionals have made it to the list of Canada's top 100 powerful women. Women have been at the center stage of India's development story and champions of Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India. Women, through innovations, are helping India grow smarter. Today, well-established startups in India are led by women. Some of the examples are Nykaa, Mamaearth, Byju's, etc. I must note the entrepreneurship of women, especially from our Tier 2 and 3 cities. By forming the self-help groups, they have served society, created employment opportunities for many, and have become self-reliant. Especially during COVID-19, women-led self-help groups produced face masks, ran community kitchens, delivered essential foods and supplies, etc. This is true Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, and I salute their undaunted spirit and resilience. Prime Minister Modi has changed the narrative from women's development to women-led development. Under Prime Minister Modi, India saw highest number of women ministers in the last 17 years. Prime Minister Modi's centric schemes have emboldened Nari Shakti, women power, and promoted gender economic advancement. Schemes like Ujjwala, making of 100 crores toilets under Swachh Bharat mission, Jal Jeevan, etc., ensured better life and dignity. Under Mudra scheme, 68% beneficiaries are women. From Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao to allowing women to work in night shifts, we are ensuring just structures. Niti Aayog's Women Entrepreneurship Platform provides knowledge and support to aspiring women entrepreneurs in scaling up their businesses. Government, through its various bold reforms, is providing an enabling ecosystem to businesses. National Single Window System, PLI schemes, liberalization of most FDI policies, reduction in compliance burden, PM Gati Shakti is helping women in all the way. I invite women entrepreneurs from both countries to tap the immense potential of our trade and investment relationship. The potential sectors of collaborations are health and pharma, textiles, food processing, renewables, sustainable solutions, digital health, and education. I hope the interactions during this event create many opportunities and partnerships that will advance our gender-inclusive trade. Swami Vivekananda had once said, "There is no chance of the welfare of the world unless the condition of women is improved. A bird cannot fly on one wing." Let's stand with our women, shoulder to shoulder, for a better and brighter world. Wish you all a very happy Women's Day. Keep inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Consul General, for pinch hitting and reading this lovely message from Minister Goyal. We really, really do appreciate it. So thank you again very much. I'll now ask Pat Koval to come back on stage to introduce our speakers and moderate the Fireside Chat on promoting women's economic empowerment in India and Canada. So over to you, Pat.
Thanks again, Christine. First of all, let me say I'm delighted to act as moderator of the panel this morning. And I'd like to just start off by giving you a brief overview of the objectives of our panel. First, of course, we'd like to share with you the unique experiences of two very successful businesswomen in Canada and India in both leading and growing companies. And in that context, as Christine has mentioned, we're hoping to highlight and address both barriers to and opportunities for women-led companies to scale internationally and to access global markets. Our panelists are going to discuss opportunities for Canada-India collaboration among women's business leaders and entrepreneurs with a view to forming a better understanding of how to build the Canada-India business relationship among women in business. And of course, again, as Christine has said, we want to clearly address the issue of gender parity, both by identifying real-world strategies for advancing gender parity and by addressing gendered barriers, such as unequal access to capital and business opportunities, and of course, the impact of male-dominated networks. Without further ado, let me introduce our highly qualified and highly engaging panelists. First, from Canada, let me welcome Elise Allen, who is a professional corporate director serving on the boards of a number of public and nonprofit companies, including those doing business in India, as well as leading several provincial economic agencies. And next, from India, please welcome Bharti Balakrishnan, who is the country head and director of Shopify in India. So ladies, let me ask you to each start off with some introductory remarks. And Elise, perhaps I can call on you first.
Great, thank you so much. And it's a delight to be here. And I look forward to everyone's questions, teeing you up now at the end of our session, because that's much more fun to engage with you and hopefully give you the information that you're looking for. Briefly, I'll talk a little bit about just who I am and the intersection with India, so you kind of know that about me. Talk to you about my experience, which in India, and some observations about it, and then specifically some thoughts to get the conversation going about how you might think about engaging in India if you are not already. And then Brock can tell me where I'm wrong and we can engage in a good conversation. So just briefly, so my career included consulting, and then I did quite a bit of work around public policy and advocacy and the intersection of business and public policy and community. And that is very important, and that proved very useful to me in my career. And then most of my career from an operating standpoint was at General Electric. And GE, for those of you that don't know, was a very broad-based company across all the infrastructure, whether it's power, aviation, a lot of industrial businesses, as well as at the time I was there on the consumer side. So that included appliances, lighting, and other consumer businesses. I'll come back to that because that talks a little bit about our intersection with India. My role there included both operational roles, and then I eventually moved into being the CEO for GE Canada. I'm just going to ask a tech question because I have quite an echo. So I just want to make sure nobody else is hearing that. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
So I will just ignore my echo. The intersection with India for GE started out as a company 100 years ago. And the way that many companies go in was a little bit on the infrastructure side, and then we eventually tried to bring in on the consumer side of the business. By the time in my experience with GE, we were starting out like many multinationals did, leveraging backroom capability in India, technology, back office services, to the point where we actually at one point offloaded, outsourced the majority of our backroom services to India companies, brought it back, bought the company at one point, and so all sorts of different changes going on. And now I've left GE, retired from GE, but I believe a lot of the services are back being done again. But that's only one small component. And that was at the time, there was a time when people outsourced for labor costs. But actually, the reason we outsourced in the past couple of decades was much more of the high-end technology because of the educated workforce, the high technical capability, the strong financial acumen, and the multinational sort of perspective that so many of the businesses have in India. So it's interesting to see how sort of India has evolved from what I would have called a labor play, where you had sort of you were arbitraging the cost of labor, to actually leveraging what is a very sophisticated, educated, and global workforce. My next intersection with, and we can elaborate more on that, Brookfield, where I'm a director of Brookfield Asset Management. We have over $600 billion of assets under management, and we tend to own and operate. And so we actually went into India. We first went into India not until 2009. We did not do our first deal in India until 2014. So another aspect about India that I think my intersection with Brookfield taught me, and I think elucidates for everyone, is you have to be patient in India. It is a tremendous opportunity. It is a fantastic market for consumer and industrial businesses, but it is complex. It is culturally different, very different, not only from our cultures, but even within India. And it takes patience. And I think when Brookfield went in, we appreciated two things. One was that we didn't know anything about India and we needed to be patient and learn. And second, the way to learn was to work with local people and to leverage a workforce that could understand and help us understand the complexity, understand the culture, and then find very good partners to work with in that country. And that took time. And so my final thought would be is I am very involved with Mars, which for those of you in Canada may know that this is a very large, globally large accelerator and catalyst for small business and startup. And so I appreciate through my experience there and elsewhere the challenges that women businesses have. So my comment would be that not only is India complex, whether you're male or female, it is only that much more complex if you are female-owned business. So my couple of comments on takeaways from this would be, I think it's a place where you want to go in with someone. You want to find a good partner. You want to leverage every possible resource that is available to help you, whether it is the Canadian Business Council, whether it is all the services that you heard from Sarah and the minister that the governments offer, whether it is probably a lot of tools and tips that I'll share with you in a few minutes, but you need help to go into India. It is not a place where you go alone, not even for big companies like Brookfield or like a General Electric. But when you get in there and you are patient, so you as startup businesses, business owners, will want to find a way to de-risk the requirements it will have on your resources. It will drain your time and it will require patience and patient capital. And so you're going to need to find ways, obviously, to support that. One is to go in with your customers that may already be there. For example, General Electric brought many of our suppliers to new regions. So if we had small businesses, there's a great example of a company in Peterborough where we brought that company and helped them further their customer base as well as their supplier base by taking them into Asia. So if you have larger customers who are interested in India or already doing business here, they could be a very good partner. As well, other women-owned businesses doing successfully in India, I do find women will help women. And you shouldn't ever be afraid to pick up that phone and make the ask. And so helping one another is really critical. And in terms of opportunities, one of the other questions I was asked to comment on was just sort of what are some interesting markets? And I would say right now, the healthcare market is one of those that's super interesting. And I'm sure Brad will talk to you a little bit probably about what's going on on some of the tech side. But from what I see in a number of the companies that I'm involved in now, we also obviously Brookfield's there on real estate and property, and that's a very healthy market. We're doing some infrastructure stuff, but it tends not to be a place where entrepreneurs are easily playing. It's big capital to get in and riskier capital. But I found healthcare. You've got a lot of private sector players. You've got a government in Canada willing to help and a lot of investment right now going into all forms of healthcare. And India is a very sophisticated healthcare market. So those are a few opening thoughts, and I'll turn it back to you, Patricia, and for discussion and comments later.
Sure. Well, thanks, Elise. I before I turn over to Barty, I'm just going to second the comment that you made about the importance of building partnerships. My own experience in working in India back in the early 2000s was very much colored by that same learning. It's so important to build partnerships and to build trust in relationships. It's culturally, that is the critical thing, and it is tough for women. You've given some great advice on how Canadian women can start to think about that. Let me turn over to Barty now to talk about your perspective on your own background, as well as to any thoughts you have on Elise's comment.
Thank you, Patricia, and thanks, Elise, for all that wonderful context. Hello, everyone. Good morning to everyone in Canada. Good evening to all of you who are dialing in from India. I'm so grateful to be here today, and I'm here to learn as much as I can share based on the over 15 years of work I've now done in India. Like Elise, I started off as a consultant straight out of business school about 15 years back with Bain. And then was briefly a banker abroad before the itch to build something in India drove me back to India. And in 2011, I came back to India to actually build a healthcare company. So I do know a thing or two about how hard it is to build a healthcare company in India. Very briefly, we were trying to organize primary healthcare, which is not a part of healthcare that is typically covered by healthcare insurance. And so it's quite broken. And our idea was to really offer to doctors an honest means to make a living, at the same time connecting millions of patients in India to quality healthcare that was protocol driven and really standardized. I'm very proud to share that I actually built that org up to be a majority women organization, and I'd love to speak to that during the conversation. The interesting part being that while nurses in front office execs typically end up being women often in most healthcare orgs, in this particular case, we found that hiring women doctors was a real value prop that we were able to provide because often in India, women doctors marry male doctors and they go on to specialize further, and women take a back seat. And here we were trying to offer them a 9-to-5 job at a clinic that they would not be able to set up and manage themselves. So fun fact from my time in healthcare back in 2011, when I wasn't really so close to tech, but I've spent the greater part of the last decade in e-commerce in the wonderful world of Indian retail. That's always been super exciting, super big, and now especially crazy energized post the pandemic due to several reasons. I actually started off with a stint at Alibaba, had a window into China, got terribly excited about what India was going to be in the next 5 years. So once we'd made a bunch of investments in India, I moved over to actually build out fashion on the India Paytm marketplace, ran all the categories, and last worked at India's Walmart called Future Group, and built out digital for their big box retail. So I've sort of made all the mistakes as a merchant on the platform side, in FMCG, in fashion. And I do understand how hard it is to really build a successful retail business in India. Though I have to say that it's so different today versus 15, 20 years back. I think 15, 20 years back in the early 2000s, the promise of Indian retail was really organized retail, like the malls were coming up, and could you bring a brand into India? Were there enough stores to grow and really build a meaningful business around? Today, I think that narrative has entirely changed. In a couple of years, e-commerce in India is going to be far bigger than organized retail, which means brands that come into India today are going to have that much easier an entry, a lower capital intensive entry into what Indian retail looks like across online marketplaces and of course your own store on Shopify, for example, as well as then extend into organized retail. So I think the last 3 years have really changed the face of Indian retail, and there's so much to do in that space in the years to come. I also want to say that specifically to Shopify, right? Our story, and Elise, to your point, that it really started off with labor arbitrage. I think the first stories of Shopify in India were really around partners serving global merchants who were building out their stores, helping them do the tech. It's completely changed now to really Indian merchants taking their own space in the world with their own websites. Cross-border shipments from India are growing. New brands are being born every day as this new channel gets created. And so there's so much opportunity in the domestic consumption story for India that perhaps wasn't there even 5 years back. And that's something to note as you think about your plans for India. I think the ability to enter it has become easier, and the ability to grow has become real. Right? I'd love to discuss more and share more as we go on.
Sure. I'm going to just follow up on a couple of things you've said. Perhaps you've talked about how the retail atmosphere has transformed.
Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit about opportunities for Canadian women who want to get a brand into India. What's your advice to them? What should they be thinking of doing? What are the best ways for them to start that journey?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. That's a great question. I actually saw a similar journey when I was in China a few years back, when suddenly the Chinese market really became exciting for the next wave of brands internationally that wanted to come into India. And right, there were so many models to consider, so many decisions to make. I think those very same things are happening today in India, right? So first, at a macro level, India's always been like a very large retail market, close to $1 trillion now. Has been very low on organized retail, so relatively unbranded. I think last I checked it was somewhere between 6 and 10%. Now what's happened is that e-commerce by itself has become a 3 to 4% market. And more importantly, in the last 3 years, what's happened is it's created categories that are allowing brands to be born online first. Some of those categories would be beauty, apparel, fashion accessories, jewelry, home decor, right? That's one big trend that's happened. So there are new brands being born every day because it's easier to launch online and then expand into offline, right? Now, the second thing is, for a brand that comes into India, typically the lay of the land would be, where are the malls? Where do you fit in terms of price point? Typically, it would be the top 10 cities, 15 cities. There'd be so many malls, so you maybe get to 100 stores and then you execute that plan and see where that goes, right? Now, that strategy, I think, has changed fundamentally, because today you could come into India, work with a local distributor, list in an online marketplace like Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra or Nykaa, depending on the category you're in, test the waters, decide how you want to expand your SKU set based on the response, then also simultaneously launch your own website to get real-time feedback from your own website, and then go on to set up your first few stores in the top 3 metros of NCR, which is Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, and then expand accordingly. And what you will find is that you're tapping into pockets of opportunity in cities that you would have not considered, right? You would not consider opening a store, for example, in Bhopal or Ujjain in your first wave. But those customers are going to be able to access you today thanks to the penetration of e-commerce, right? And that's changed sort of how you would think about an entry strategy in India. I see a lot of the chat around how would you identify a partner. I think it's a great question. Look, there's typically 2 ways to go in India. One way is to set up your own subsidiary, which is still, I'd argue, relatively complex, especially if you don't understand the customer and the business model yet. The other way is to identify a partner. If you're in retail, typically what I've seen a lot of companies coming from outside do is work with local distributors who have the cash flows to support you, who know the lay of the land. And now they're also taking on to online. They also do online distribution. So try and identify a distributor who's able to, who has the funds to work with you and has the know-how of working online and offline. That's a good way to go, and start small and grow from there. And definitely use online to test the market. Because you don't have to bring all of it together at the same time. You don't need 250 SKUs to set up a 500 square feet shop. It's very important to leverage the large marketplaces, learn, do a lot of benchmarking. I think the one thing people get wrong in India is the price points. We are still a very price sensitive market. There is a top creamy layer of potentially customers who meet a brand promise that perhaps comes from Canada. So do that homework well. I always say India is not the story of a billion. It's a story of many 10 million opportunities, and you need to know which one is yours.
To you, because when Brookfield, as you mentioned, when Brookfield went into India, they didn't do their first deal for a number of years. And in fact, I recall well that they spent quite a bit of time trying to identify partners and identify who was a good partner. Maybe you could comment a little bit from the perspective of the tech industry and SME generally. What would you recommend in terms of how particularly women and entrepreneurs could try to identify good partners?
Yeah, I think Patricia, it's so important, and I tend to be a little bit more conservative in that approach in the companies that I've been with. So we would oftentimes work perhaps through your accounting firm or one of the large accounting firms, where they have, what we really want is people who are good on the ground. So somebody asked a little bit about coaching from Canada. We actually want coaching from other people in India on who is good, who has a good reputation, who's trustworthy. And, I can tell you in my GE experience, we had some pretty bad experiences too. Even a company like GE ended up with the wrong partner on occasion. And so it's pretty important to go slowly, to kind of check your references in that sense, really use local information to assess who will bring you the capability that you need, which of course begs the question of making sure you know what capability you need and what you are looking for in a partner so that you can end up with the right one. And that goes back to just first learning about the market, so you understand what are the critical components for your business. And so therefore, where do you need that type of help? We have always hired top local talent to work with us, and have taken the time to hire good people. So not even partners, but our employees are local employees. In the case of Brookfield, it was a fellow of India origin, actually born in Canada. But Anuj was, in Toronto. I'm not sure if he had been to India or not, but he was the person who then we asked, would you go to India? Same with GE. In a couple of cases, we had folks who had a North American perspective on business and maybe knew the company, but were willing to then go over and were excited to get reacquainted or get to know the culture and help us find locally based talent that then could help us find the partners. So it wasn't, a fast step in the industries that we were in, but we were also playing for the long term. So we were willing to take that time to find the right partners, because finding the wrong one could break your chance of even trying again, right? Or you'd lose so much more time. So we went in both cases. We went slower, we went local, and we went a bit conservatively.
Thanks. I will say that in addition to the accounting firms that you've mentioned, and this is not self-interested, because although I'm a lawyer, I'm not practicing any longer.
Yeah, the law firms.
The law firms are also
Totally.
great sources, and there are a number of large, major law firms in India who
Yes.
have offices in Mumbai, Delhi, sometimes Bengaluru, sometimes Kolkata, where there are leading women partners at those firms who are particularly interested in helping women. And so there are a lot of introductions that can be made in that way.
Also the banks, Patricia, too, I would say, right? So the banks, and of course our consul general offices, which Sarah mentioned in her opening remarks, but can be tremendously helpful. And then there's international women's organizations that people, if they're part of or not, they should consider if they really do want to be going globally, and leveraging those international women connections, whether it's through a Young Presidents organization or it's through the International Women's, I think it's called Foundation. But other groups like that can be very helpful.
In terms of women helping women, what about that in India, Bharti? Are there organizations focused on that? Are there incubators in particular to help women-owned organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're a very exciting emerging ecosystem. We are young, right? Startups, are about a little over a decade old in India, though we are a country of entrepreneurs. So I suspect this is going to blow up in the decades to come. And as we evolve, there's more and more women in senior roles at VCs, in PEs. And I think it's starting to become quite a tight network. I think particularly we're just celebrating Women's Week at Shopify India as well. And I've been putting out a woman founder story every day. And there's so many to dip into, right? And though that network is very strong, women entrepreneurs I find really help each other out. I'd often find people sort of asking each other, who was your manufacturer? Which logistics partner are you using? Are you sure this is the right price? And it's quite a solid network. And I think even, for those of you in the audience from Canada considering entering India, let's say you're in beauty, try and seek out some of these founders of famous brands on LinkedIn, reach out to them. They're more than happy to share. It's really quite a community. People want to give back, and they're very trustworthy because they've been in the same path as you guys. They just happen to have done it in India.
Elise, maybe you could comment on the role. I know you've mentioned to the group that you've had a role for many years with Mars. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the kind of incubation opportunities that Mars is offering to Canadian women interested in launching businesses and perhaps going to India.
Yes, for sure. So, I mean, Mars, for those of you that don't know, is based in Toronto, but is a national organization willing to help folks across the country, very involved across Ontario with all the other accelerators, but has also been reaching out and making more and more connections elsewhere in Canada. It is probably the largest accelerator in North America. Ilsa, who you're going to hear from, I think she's on tomorrow, Pat. Ilsa actually was our founder, founding CEO, and now a fellow by the name of Young Wu, who is a very successful entrepreneur on his own, has been leading the organization since Ilsa's retirement a couple of years ago. And the organization does a couple of things. One, it focuses on education support of every type for entrepreneurs. And you can go onto the website, and I encourage you to go on to what is a terrific website that talks about the incredible amount of education, the mentoring programs, as well as the access to venture capital, to IP and licensing information. Really everything you need as a startup is available at Mars across all sectors. The other thing that they have is access to funding. So they've had something called the IAF Fund, which they have just announced a couple of weeks ago with the Ontario government, something called Graphite, which will be another investment fund specifically for high growth startups. They also help oversee a number of the federal and provincial venture funds, where they are either the manager of the fund of funds, or they are one of the funds allocating the money. So it is really, if you're a startup and you're not quite sure, you're not connected to someone like Communitech in Waterloo, where I know there are some great services and companies up in, I think it's Invest Ottawa, you really should be walking the halls of Mars, which is right downtown Toronto, University Avenue. They have multi-towers that are also mission dedicated for space. So they have tech space, they have wet lab space. And if they don't, their tenants also offer services to startup and entrepreneurs. All the banks, legal firms, accounting firms, many of them walk the halls of Mars or have offices there. So a very strong resource for Canadian startups. And I encourage you to look at it and see it. They're also hiring a ton of people too. So if anyone knows folks wanting to work with startups, they're very good at recruiting to help startups get folks that want to work in that ecosystem. You're on mute.
Whoops, there. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Elise. Let's turn now to the thorny issue of gender parity and how that is affecting women entrepreneurs. Bharti, perhaps you can start by giving us a sense of what is the current situation in India in terms of gender parity, and how are gender issues affecting women entrepreneurs and women business leaders?
Yeah, sure, Pat. I think it's a subject close to all our hearts as we navigate careers, isn't it, wherever we may be. I think it's a fact that women are just underrepresented in corporate India, as perhaps is true globally in most countries. And while it's changing, it's definitely not changing soon enough. There's a lot of cultural nuance to why women aren't able to go back to work. It does take a village to raise children. That's a natural gap that comes in. And I think that eventually a lot of women in my generation now feel that the real way to solve this is to really have a lot of role models and to really speak to the role models and to keep showcasing examples that this can be done. And I can see that now, this is now in India, the third decade post liberalization. So there's really like homegrown brands growing up in a way that we've never seen before. And we're seeing more and more women stay at work and make a mark, and not just in corporate, but beyond. But the fact is that we are very few, and there's never enough that's being done. And yes, when you look at university, the statistics improve. There are more women going and getting a higher education than ever before, but that doesn't mean that they're staying at work. So there's a lot of work to be done there. On the entrepreneur side, it's very encouraging to see women in their early 20s and such starting companies. I think the environment is conducive. There's a lot of capital. All the global big VC funds are in India. They all have women incubators. So all of that is very exciting, but it's still small in the context of the problem that we want to solve.
Elise, maybe I can ask you to comment on gender parity issues here in Canada.
Sure. I mean, it's. I was reading a bit about India over the past week in preparation, just on the numbers around gender. And it's just amazing to me whether we're a highly developing, large, small, complex, or simple. The challenges from country to country and region to region seem to be so much the same, though perhaps at different stages of the evolution, but still many of the same issues. I had the opportunity, Pat, to work on a U.S.-Canadian council on women entrepreneurs, and it was really interesting. We wrote 5 different studies, 5 different reports on the issues. Obviously, one was financing and the importance of financing and the need to get more women into the positions of decision making, as Bharti was just saying, in venture capital firms, in banks, in different places. So, trying to find the women and get women in decision making. The statistics around, women-owned businesses, women co-founded businesses is really quite impressive when you look at the results, the performance results. I mean, there's a lot of hard data, including some recently done by a fellow at McMaster, that just talked about both the decision-making capability of women, the actual results that you're getting from women-owned businesses relative to men, or women co-founded businesses. In all cases, considerably better. So, I mean, there is some compelling data that people could be using and incorporating into some of their pitch books that might be helpful for those if they're pitching to someone who maybe doesn't know and hasn't seen the light yet. but that that continues to be an issue. So I think trying to find it's still going to be challenging on the financing side, and so you just have to go down every channel that you can. And I think, to Bharti's comment, try and leverage women connections, women, that got money from one place. That might be a place that is just more open-minded and more understanding of women-owned businesses. So I think you have to recognize the world that you're still dealing in and address it. If you're maybe bring in a co-founder that's male, as much as we hate that, but in some cases that might help on the financing side. That's the fact of it. And so, looking at some of those issues, there are also in Canada, SHEO, there's Jane Bannister, there's a number of women venture capitalists that are helping women firms, and Mars has access to all of them. They do a lot of women-specific efforts, as do Communitech and do a number of the others. So, I mean, leverage those, look for them, find them. They are there. You just have to make the time to find them out. The other comment I'd make is we one of the research projects we did was about procurement. And we talked about how in the US and in Germany and a couple of countries, they have really good supportive procurement policies for women-owned businesses. And we were recommending that Canada work on that. And certainly Mary Ng has been a passionate promoter of women-owned businesses. So the minister has been great that way. And I think the federal government, and I'm involved in Ontario, continue to build out supports and support for women-owned and for small business. I don't know what's available, Bharti, in India in that respect, but there are, some of these procurement programs that are more sensitive to or helpful for women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses are something that you might want to look for? I don't know if I can ask Barty, but are you familiar with those in India? Because in the US, they've been very successful, which is why we were recommending them up in, to do more of them up in Canada.
Right. No, I do know that the government in the last few years has made procurement in general more transparent in the country, which itself is a big step, more digitization, more accessible. But I don't know if there's a gender lens on that. But I remember the lady, Ms. Srivastava, earlier spoke to, the Mudra scheme of borrowing, where actually, I think, if I remember right, 70% of those who availed of the scheme were women, which is a great sign of sort of capital flowing into the system, becoming accessible, because I think that's a big problem starting point in India, right? Like that first 10,000 rupees that gets you going on a business is often, unfortunately, not accessible to the average Indian woman. And I do feel like some of those schemes have really, really moved the needle in India. And just going back to role models, right? I mean, the famous Shark Tank season 1 just happened in India. And I think it's really changed the narrative in the average Indian household on entrepreneurship. And the number of women who were showcased, who were running small businesses successfully, looking to raise capital to become bigger. 3 of the judges were women, very successful entrepreneurs who'd built brands in the last, less than a decade. I feel all of that is having a great positive effect in India. And once the narrative starts to change, then more happens more easily, right? So that's been great to watch. Sorry.
That event that you referred to.
Say that again. Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask the event that you just referred to with judging. What was that?
So I'm sure you're familiar with Shark Tank in the US, right? And that season 1 just came to India. And because I feel it was on television, it really reached every household, right? And there was so much conversation around it. And, I thought to myself, we are a country of entrepreneurs. We've always been. Every household in India has an entrepreneur. But the fact that 3 of the 7 judges were women, and they were very successful women who built brands that people know, and the number of contestants that came on that presented businesses that were small but profitable and were looking to raise equity to sort of go on and build something bigger was so encouraging, and sort of mainstreams the idea that women can run successful businesses, and it really doesn't matter where you start or where the money came from to grow it, right? So that, I feel, has had a very positive impact on the idea of entrepreneurship in general, and definitely a positive impact on the number of women who are trying to run their own businesses.
I'm getting a note from our folks that one of our India delegates is actually going to be on the Canadian version of that, which is Dragon's Den. So it's also a great way to profile. And I'm also seeing a note that APF is actually, we talked about our organizations that women entrepreneurs can look to work with, and Asia Pacific Foundation is partnered with SheEO and accepts up to 5 SheEO ventures per mission. So that's also more information. What about coaching? What about coaching within your organizations? Coaching women to succeed, coaching women to become more entrepreneurial. Barty, maybe you can talk about what's happening within Indian organizations, particularly larger Indian organizations, on that front.
Yeah, I think the first thing that's happened in the last 5 years, I feel, is people are aware that there are multiple ways to solve this problem, right? It's like, at the time of recruitment, can you lean in to sort of bring more candidates through the pipeline? Once they've come in, can you lean in to sort of create an environment where they feel like they can say what they want to, right? And I've personally found every time I'm in a room where there's, very few women, like, you have to find the allies and the men in the room. And it's not like all men are the same, right? There are many women, there are many men who proactively support women. And I think it's very important that in the practicality of it, you find the men who are your allies, your sponsors, and you really, lean on them to help you sort of succeed and grow up in this org, right? And I feel like there's increasingly formal ways to do that. And there are companies sort of actively publicizing that, which creates positive momentum. It's a virtuous cycle because, when one great brand puts out on LinkedIn that they offer this, then other companies are encouraged to match that. And I think they also create like many soft situations in which you can showcase what you can do, which is always good in a large organization. So I feel we still have some way to go in creating more formal mainstream programs. And dare I say, I feel like India is changing so rapidly. Coaching is probably something all senior management should have access to, and not just women, but definitely, especially women. I feel a lot of the MNCs now offer it. There's a lot of flexibility, and there are role models to sort of look up to, which is so helpful.
You've worked with that have gone into India. Are there mechanisms within those companies to facilitate coaching for individuals who are interested in pursuing Canada India business?
I missed. Did you address that to me, Pat? You were on.
To you.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
your sound comes on a little bit after you start, so I didn't catch who it was addressed to. So if I got the question, then it was, in terms of coaching women, certainly like when I was with GE, and I think a lot of the large multinational, we were very progressive, especially when I look back now on support for women, women in STEM, women entrepreneurs. We had set up, and a lot of larger companies now are setting up internal venture capital groups. They're using it not only for financial return, but as a means for strategic R&D and product extension. So, and finding adjacencies. So, I mean, there are a lot of large companies that you can go to now that have venture groups. With BDC, we sponsored, in Canada, BDC had sponsored and GE participated an annual sort of venture capital discussion where they spoke about sort of and featured a lot of the large companies that have venture capital groups. My reason for mentioning that is that because these venture groups were embedded in large companies, they were also very open towards women entrepreneurism and also helping women entrepreneurs to grow and to get the coaching and support that they needed. I will also say that a lot of the accelerators across Canada all have very aggressive and strong mentoring programs. That's one of the things they are working really hard to offer because it's very available in the States with venture capital firms. And people have commented that it is harder to get access to operational mentors as a startup when you're in Canada. So I know Mars works very hard at a very large mentoring program. As do Communitech and a number of the other accelerators, the one at Ryerson as well. So I think, there is coaching available, but like all these things, sometimes it's just, you have to work to find it. You kind of have to go to the places and ask the questions. But I think you will also find many women. I can't tell you how many women I know that are supporting and mentoring other women. And they always say, see her, be her, right? If you see her, you can be her. And I think that is so true. The more women see other women being successful, like I think in India, that will have such a profound effect as social media allows these women's success stories to be more widely promoted and heard. It really does encourage. I see now I'm very involved in a couple of business schools. And, there was a time business schools always graduated people that went into the large companies. I'm amazed at the number, especially women coming out of business school that want to be entrepreneurs because they want to control their life and the balance in their life. And they know as an entrepreneur, they can work 24/7 because they choose to, or they can choose to make something smaller or something bigger. And so even the universities now have a lot more robust programs, right, for entrepreneurs and for growth, and the colleges do as well. So there are resources out there. It's just, you have to go looking for them to leverage them.
one of the things I'll give a shout out for is certainly a number of Canadian business schools and have internship type programs for Indian students who could basically come and do a shorter program and actually work in a Canadian company. Some of the Canadian law firms have the same thing for Indian students who are interested in getting to understand the legal aspects of between Canada and India, which I will say are remarkably similar, and that's one of the reasons why it's so easy. Well, it's so easy to do business in India when you're a Canadian because our legal systems are so similar. There isn't that kind of shock to the system that there is when people go into countries with different legal backgrounds.
That's a good point, Patricia, that we hadn't talked about that I have heard and I know from GE is the legal system, and leveraging, and you mentioned it earlier, but leveraging sort of that, being able to go into a country where there's a lot of countries to choose from, but having one where you understand the law and the rule of law, and it is somewhat similar to Canada, is a real plus relative to other country options.
Absolutely.
And I think there are, to your point, and well from your counsel, there are a lot of Canadian connections to India. They are broad and they are deep, and people can leverage that and should leverage that.
Yeah.
I mean, many of our insurance companies, many of our banks, many of our just large companies are very active in India, not to mention all the Indian-owned businesses we actually have in Canada. So there's a lot of ways to get on the ground perspective to sort of help assess your decision of whether you want to go there or how you want to go there or to get help to go there.
One other point I'd make, and Barty, I'll be interested in see if you agree. During my time negotiating transactions in India, both coming from India into Canada and the other way around, one thing that I found was that the style of negotiation between business people in Canada and India is remarkably similar. When you contrast that negotiation styles in other countries, including country south of the border of us, which is sometimes a bit different from our own, I found that we were remarkably close in terms of how we approach negotiation style and the rule, including the rule of law, but just simply the personal style in negotiating and appreciating when agreement had been reached on points and moving forward was remarkably similar.
Yeah, I think I was just reflecting as you were speaking, Pat, that the average professional you're dealing with in India has actually had a pretty similar education and has a lot of significant global exposure, well versed in English, comfortable, right, dealing with folks across the world, which I think is actually quite unique. I don't think as Indians we see it, but when you said that thing about there's so many countries to choose from, I think this can become a very meaningful criteria very quickly, right? And of course, it reflects in the number of Indians who've sort of gone on to become global executives. And it's all part of like this larger like community of people like that who've been created. And yeah, I mean, personally, I've always felt like Canadians have always been friends, very similar, very
Yes.
relatable. And I'm enjoying that now in my role at Shopify. This is the first Canadian company I'm working for. But I can see what you're saying. It's I think there's a lot of like stereotyping about Indians being very sort of we bargain and so on. But actually, I feel like in the corporate context, at least, it's been very professional, very rational, very thoughtful. Right. That's been my experience. I can speak to that. So I do see what you mean. Yeah.
I'm going to actually move us along because I'm mindful of the time. I just remind the audience that if you have any burning question that you'd like to ask, please let us know now. But as we're moving towards wrapping up, I'm going to ask each of you, what's the best advice you can give to an entrepreneur in your country who wants to do business in the other's country? Elise, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So for Canadians wanting to do business in India, I would encourage you to reach out in Canada, where you are now, to people who have done business in India and really learn as much as you can from them, from their experience on the ground, so that, and then leverage our Canadian resources on the ground in India. And the people that you are meeting through this, like Barty and others, to kind of test your hypotheses, kind of say, okay, I want to go to India. This is why. This is how I think I need to go. Do your homework here and get as much as you can here so that you have a game plan, and then go test it with the contacts that the folks in Canada have made for you in India, and sort of validate your hypotheses about, is this right? Is it right for me? And can I sort of, is the timeline appropriate for my company where I am at this time? Or what do I need to shorten that timeline? What would be the critical factors to sort of close that timeline or de-risk what might be perceived as risks? But, there's a lot of resources to do homework first here, so that you can go over there and use your time efficiently, have your contacts already made when you get there, and then kind of validate your hypotheses. And you can do that with people that you know and trust through your Canadian connections.
Barney, maybe I can just get you to focus on a slightly different question, but very relevant to our audience. What's the best advice that you would give on closing to our women SMEs who are looking to India?
Looking to come to India? Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely a land of opportunity now. The timing is right. Growth is not exponential, but slow and steady. But probably the best in the world right now. So definitely, I would say take a bet. Do your homework before you come to India. Use precedents, examples, like, for example, in the world of retail, finding a distributor who has worked with multinational brands, right? Who's got a history of doing this. You will find a lot of those examples, because for 20 years now, brands have been coming to India and trying to figure out India. So there's a lot of history. Please do your research and try and work with someone who's done this before. That's one. The second is, I think online is a very powerful way to test the market, and that works both ways. I see a lot of Indian brands today open up stores that sell in Canada to the Indian diaspora or otherwise, or sell to the UAE or sell to Australia before they sort of take steps to be actually in that country. I think that's a very valuable thing to do. And even at Shopify, we're working on trying to make that happen. So if you have a Shopify store in Canada, is there a way for you to sell on a marketplace in India or sell to India? That's something we're working on. I see that becoming a trend in the years to come. So I'd use online in a big way to test hypotheses. And do not feel like everything that you do in your home country you need to do in India. It is not as deep a market yet. And I feel like people put a lot of money into inventories and put a lot of money into bringing everything in and feel like then the market is shallow. No, you need to tweak what you have for the market, start small, and, slowly grow it. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. I don't see any additional questions from our audience. So let me thank both of you for what's been a really engaging and fun panel. It's great. It's been great to have this conversation, and I hope all of our audience have enjoyed it. So once again, thank you to you, and actually thank you to our audience. Merci. And I'm going to turn it back to Christine.
Thank you so much, Pat, Bart, advice. Their own hypotheses and strategies for growing their businesses through international trade diversification, and certainly looking to the India market, which has exponential growth in the years to come. Human resilience, in particular that of women, has been considerably tested by COVID-19 over the past 2 years. But I think we may finally be turning the corner. And as the old adage goes, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. This is especially true in describing women entrepreneurs who have not only had to pivot from pre-pandemic business models or practices to survive, but have had to take on added responsibilities of home care and family care while keeping their businesses alive. Our delegates are excellent examples of this resilience. With targeted exposure to new opportunities in markets like India's, we're confident that they will succeed in achieving and even surpassing their business goals. Tomorrow, we'll be featuring trailblazing entrepreneurs, Miss Upasana Thakur, co-founder, chairman, and executive director of MobiQuick, one of India's recent unicorns, Ms. Geeta Sankapanavar, founder and CEO of Akira Impact Canada, and our moderator, Dr. Ilse Turnick, who Elise mentioned earlier, former CEO of Mars Discovery District, one of Canada's leading tech accelerators. Following this fireside chat tomorrow, we will host a pitch session with our delegates who will present their value propositions and answer questions from the audience. So tune in at the same time tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8:30 p.m. India Standard Time. This brings to a close day one of virtual mission to India. But before we call it a day, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Government of Canada for their generous contributions to this Women's Mission series, our presenting sponsor, Air Canada, our partner, the Canada-India Business Council, and all the supporting organizations both in Canada and India for their help in realizing this groundbreaking mission to India. To our speakers, many, many thanks for inspiring the delegates and the rest of us to do more to help women in business. Thanks everyone for your attention and have a good rest of the day, evening, and night.